So thank you for joining. We're here at LendCity Studios in Windsor, Ontario. I have Christian Janice and Jordan Lusu, lawyer, realtor. My name is Paul McAllister, a mortgage agent at LendCity. I'm here today. We're here to discuss, um, you know, different things. Really, I wanted to understand your legal process, kind of when clients come to you, how does it look like with Christian? And then I asked Jordan to come here just to kind of supplement of like what real life examples what kind of questions are you getting from your clients and those types of things. And I have my own questions that I want to ask as well. So we have a lawyer here, so I want to try to ask as many legal questions and around the questions and the processes that we kind of so I'm going to introduce yourself, and then you can just go into kind of the application process.
Yeah, so my name's Christian Janice. I'm the founder of Simply Close Real Estate Lawyers. We're a law firm. We started during the pandemic. The long story short is that during the pandemic, they changed the rules so that you could commission documents online, and that allowed it so that any real estate closing could basically be signed entirely electronically. I knew that was a game changer. I tried to do it within my firm. They didn't want to invest in any of the software to allow us to do that. So I said, you know what, I'll start it on my own. So it started as this idea where we're just going to do the electronic signings, and now it's kind of evolved through some things that have happened in the industry. Like there's a monopoly on the document generation with a program called Dye & Durham Unity. So they've bumped their prices up for how much they charge per transaction. So I took a pivot and said, you know what, I'm going to just create this entire software tech-based law firm that's going to make real estate closing super simple, but also super informative.
So what is that? Like, what have they monopolized specifically?
When we get the deal, there's a bunch of information that we have to collect. We have to get home insurance, we have to get information from the client, the IDs. That all of that goes into a database. So they've monopolized that process, but even when I was using them, one of the issues that I had was that there's all these other things, like for example, the intake process, which we're going to discuss, the closing day, which they don't address. So I decided that I was going to just hire a software developer myself and create a completely customized program that's strictly based on real estate closings. So how it works is when we get a file, we reach out to the client within 24 hours. That's our commitment to whoever refers to us, just so that the client knows that we have their information and that we're going to get started. So it doesn't matter if your deal's closing next week or if it's not closing for 2 months. We like to reach out and gather the information from them just so that they know. Because we've heard a lot of complaints about how, oh, I haven't heard from the lawyer in a month and now we're closing in 2 weeks. The reality is that we don't have the ability to start or complete a file right away because the mortgage lenders don't necessarily send us the instructions until a week or two in advance. So on our end, it's normal, but for clients, this is, they don't buy houses every single week. They don't deal with this every single day. So we start the process by having an intake form. It's a welcome email that shows you exactly what the process is. So it has it typed out, but it also has a video that describes everything that you're going to go through, what we call the closing journey. And in that email, there's a link and it brings you to an intake form. And the intake form, we try to keep it as simple as possible. And in the back end, it's a little bit more complex. It has a bunch of conditional logic. So if you answer that you have a spouse, then we collect your spouse's information. If you don't, then we just cut those questions out. So it takes you through question by question and brings you through all of the information that we need. That's how it gets started. In the background, there are a bunch of things that we do. So we do the title search. We get the mortgage instructions, so we'll be dealing with the realtor for the agreement of purchase and sale if we don't have it already. We'll coordinate to make sure if there's any issues with the final walkthrough. So we do all these things in the background. But once everything's ready to sign, we send another email to our clients that says, hey, everything's ready. Click a link and it brings you to a calendar. And in that calendar, you just pick any time that you're free to sign. So it's much simpler than having to call the office to schedule an appointment. Our assistants don't have to go back and forth with you. Hey, is Christian available at 2 on Thursday? Oh, he was, but not anymore. So once you pick, it reserves that date and time in our calendar.
And so for that, all right, we've got through it. I've clicked the link. I've scheduled the time. What happened? Is that an online? Is it online, or is it an option of saying online or in person, or how does that work?
So we try to do everything electronically. Obviously, if a client wants to sign in person, that's fine, and we'll accommodate that. We have a note inside the file if they don't want to sign electronically. So they'll still go through the same process, but rather than setting up all the documents online, they just get a calendar invite. So they'll get a calendar invite, and it will say, "Hey, here's the instructions on where you have to go to sign." We'll have everything printed and ready for them when they come. For the online, we set everything up in the database or the portal that we use to sign. It's basically got video and signing capabilities built into one. So it's not like DocuSign. You don't just get an email and sign out of nowhere. We are on video. It is the exact same as being in person. We go through every single page one by one. You actually have to sign one by one with your finger. So it's like a wet ink or an actual signature. And we share our screen and we go through everything.
Is it available? Can I do it on my phone?
You can do it on your phone. The only caveat about that is that it is a little bit small. Like if we're sharing our screen and your screen is small, but you can do it. We have had clients do it. For example, sometimes their laptops are packed away or their computers packed away or they're on the go. You can do it online. You just might have trouble seeing.
So I have a lot of meetings. I work a lot online, and I have a lot of meetings online. And I think I'm good at seeing those small documents. But I just, when you talk about this process, when I seen the process and I filled out like that dummy file or whatever, I was blown away from being a real estate investor. I'm just like, oh my God, like if I could do this on the phone, or if I can do this, sometimes I have my computer in my car open. It's so much easier. It's so convenient. And that's why I was like, I'm sold. Like you've sold me 1,000,000%, because the convenience that you're offering with this, and you're still getting the same quality. Yeah, so I'm sold. I just wanted to add that as an investor or as someone who's always on the go, to be able to close a deal without going to the physical lawyer's office. I know we did it during COVID, and it was even still, I actually went in during COVID. But to do it as a normal business is, to me, you're ahead of the game.
Yeah, a lot of lawyers are doing it differently. So some of them will mail you a package and then you'll have to sign over Zoom and then send it back. Some of them will do by DocuSign and use Zoom. I find that our system's a little more streamlined because it's all in one. And when the meeting is over, we both get copies of it, so we don't have to scan anything. A lot of clients will say, "Hey, can you send us a copy of that?" You don't have to worry about that. Everything that you signed and that was reviewed with you, it's good for the clients because they want it, but it's also good for me because then nobody can say, "Hey, like that wasn't reviewed with me." It's like, well, it was in the package, and you can't really say that we didn't discuss it.
Nice.
So yeah, it's the system that we have. I could see how people might think, oh, like electronic, are they paying attention, or is it a lesser service? It's actually the exact same as going in person, and everything that we do in the background is actually much better because behind closed doors, there's all these other things that we have going on. So for example, when somebody does fill out the intake form, it's connected to their file. So our assistants aren't typing in Paul McAllister. We already have it in there. We already have your date of birth from when you filled out that form. And why that's important is that frees up their time, and then it frees up my time so that we have more time to spend on the things that actually matter. Like if I have an assistant typing in everyone's date of birth and the address, and that takes up a lot of time, right? But now they're going to have more time to focus on getting the title search records ahead of time. That's actually what allows us to close quicker than other law firms, is because everything's so connected. We don't have to wait. I'm not waiting for somebody to say, "Hey, like did Brenda fill out the documents online? Can we get this signed?" It's automatically connected. And we have a lot of other connections. Like we're connected with the land registry office, so we can do our title search right through our database. So for example, the legal description for the property, rather than searching it in that other database, which is TerraView, it's the land registry records, and then copying and pasting it, we're connected. So once we search the property, it automatically pulls into our system. So she doesn't have to type it or copy and paste it.
Yeah, that's super cool. LendCity, we're the same way in a lot of ways. With the intake form is connected, so our MINs are spending more time on just getting the proper documents to support kind of what has been put in there, and it frees up their time. And then from an agent standpoint, it frees up our time, because if you go in and you fill out the application, with obviously the quality of, some people like leaving stuff blank, and that's what throws our process off in terms of time. But if you fill in the actual documents, you fill in all the information, we can turn that around. Like within 5 minutes, our admin teams are on it, and if everything's there, within 5 more minutes, our agents are on it, and we're already looking on what is the best product for that person. So I feel like it's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, it sounds exactly like what we do, and why it's good for us is that because everything's already entered and connected, we don't have to worry about if something, like, for example, if I have somebody calling, like, so let's say Brenda's calling a client, there's an issue with, is what she wrote down exactly what the client actually wanted, right? Because sometimes clients will say, if they're going through a separation, like, give 60% to me and 40% to them. And it's like, we want to make sure that that's accurate. So we actually prefer that people follow the system, even if we already know the information, just so that we have it written there, so we know, like, this is exactly what they wanted, so nobody can turn around later and say, no, I wanted it to be 65-35, right? Also having it, I know that a lot of realtors have told me that they have issues with lawyers contacting clients, but because we're not bogged down with all the little details that aren't necessarily important to keeping the transaction going, we're able to have more time available to contact realtors, make sure that we're communicating with them, and make sure that we're communicating with clients.
We're the same. We have the same principles at LendCity, and I think for Jordan, like, another thing of why I work with Jordan a lot. He's actually my personal realtor, but like he has a commitment to communication
And service.
and service, right? And I think that's the same thing that you're bringing here is commitment to communication. And LendCity, we're the same. And the reason we're able to do that is because of the intake. We're not spending that time. Like when I'm going through a deal with Jordan, I'm making sure, like, who's the lawyer? Like, am I communicating with Jordan? Am I communicating with the lawyer? Am I communicating with the lender? Am I keeping everyone on the same page? That's really important to me. And it sounds like it's the same. Like it's so easy when everybody's aligned, all professionals involved in the deal.
For sure.
I know you appreciate that a lot. And you're kind of the one that even before I was an agent, you kind of, I learned that from just watching how you work.
Yeah, big time. The most important thing for me, especially working with other business professionals, is are they delivering that same type of service that I try to give clients and that I would expect, right? So being able to call a mortgage rep or call a lawyer's office and getting a response right away or within a good amount of time is huge, right? Because people don't know and they're unsure, they're nervous about things. So
Yeah, I know, like, when people are buying and selling houses, it's not like it's not something that they do frequently. So we take it very serious. I know some people are more antsy than others, but we try to accommodate pretty much everyone's request. So if somebody's wants financial information ahead of time, we know that, okay, maybe they don't necessarily need it right away, but we try to get it to them if they need it sooner, just to kind of help ease their mind. Because first-time home buyers, they're very antsy. Like, oh, do I need to get my home insurance right away? Like, truth be told, you could send us the home insurance the day before, but we'll try and ease that by saying, okay, look, this is who the lender is, this is what you need the insurance to say, and, like, let's try and get it earlier, just so that they feel better. I don't want them to feel like this is just sitting there and nothing's being done.
Yeah, and some people won't be able to sleep.
Yeah.
No, it's for sure. I see that. I have a first-time home buyer right now who's going through it, and they have so many questions because they don't want to mess up, right? They heard all kinds of stories, and they're just like, all right, what do I do? Like with the real estate agent, what do I do with the lawyer? Like, they don't even, the insurance, the taxes. Like, they have so many questions, and it's just trying to go above and beyond. Like, yeah, I'm a mortgage agent, but I also that's where I try to connect them with professionals that I know have the same kind of commitments. It's kind of why I've asked you both here, is just because I know that your commitments are very similar to mine. And it's not just about like, oh, I'm only going to give you the best rates and the best deal. It's just like whatever you need. If you need a home inspector, I kind of know what type of person like might match that client, or what type of realtor, or what type of, so that's like, it's really important to me, is what I want to emphasize there.
And what we're trying to do now is, now that I've got the real estate law side locked down and it's working as intended, we're trying to, because there's a lot of things that come up in transactions. Like I said, we don't necessarily, if we have a file that's been there, like let's say it's not closing until June and it's a first-time home buyer, this is a good example, right? We're not going to get the mortgage instructions right away. So we're not going to have them in March. So we can't do the file. It doesn't make sense for us to do half the file, wait for the mortgage instructions, and do half of it again. But there are, some misconceptions about the first-time home buyer and the land transfer tax. So what we're trying to do is implement educational resources now so if in the intake form you've indicated you're a first-time home buyer, well, now what we want to have is let's send them a follow-up email, and it's automated because it's the same information every single time, but saying, hey, Paul, you've indicated that you were a first-time home buyer. Just so you know, this is how it works. The first-time home buyer, they call it a rebate, but you get it at the time of closing, is capped at $4,000. So if you bought a $500,000 home, even though you're going to get that first-time home buyer land transfer tax discount, you're still going to have a balance left over. Sometimes that catches them by surprise because, they're finding out 2 weeks before, oh, I need to come up with an extra $1,200. I had no idea. I thought the land transfer tax was free. So what we're trying to do now is not just like our commitment to customer service is not just to say like, hey, we do the real estate like law side of things and we're going to do the title search and make sure that we're covered on everything that the lawyer has to do, but also providing educational resources to say you're a first-time home buyer, this is what you need to know, or also notifying people of, hey, you're in Kingsville, you're closing in a week. You may have already contacted the utility companies, but if you haven't, these are these are the two companies you're dealing with, and these are the instructions on how to get it set up. Because even though it doesn't necessarily have to do with our job, the lawyer is heavily involved in. I get clients that ask me all the time, like, how do I pay the taxes? How do I set up the utilities? How do I contact them for the final bill? So to standardize that and say, hey, you're selling from Windsor, you probably know who the provider is, but make sure that you call NWIN, for example, and let them know. So we're trying to add in more educational resources to let people know of what to expect or provide more guidance on important topics that we get asked frequently.
No, you're adding value, right? Adding value outside of the lens of what people I think might think. It's the same thing I think we all do, and I think it's important because the more we can educate and add value to our clients, the easier it is for them in terms of experience, but the easier for us. I think it leads into a question about for me of what type of speed. I know we talked a few weeks ago, Jordan and I, about going from getting a pre-approval, going from pre-approval to an approval. How fast can we do that? What kind of speed is this? Like, how long does this application process take? Or if I come to you and I say, all right, I need to close in a week. I remember we were in this situation not too long ago, and the lawyer was like, honestly, I need at least, I don't know, what was it,
a couple business days there.
5 to 7 business days. And we needed it quicker. But he was like, this is what I need. So we actually moved the actual closing date because the lawyer was like, I need that time. So, like, what would be the expectation for working with Simply Close?
5 to 7 business days is definitely ideal, like at a minimum, because there are a lot of things that we have to do. We can do it I've had a mortgage agent reach out to me and say, hey, I need help with a file. I thought it was a refinance file. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's no problem. Because he was, can you do it by tomorrow? And I'm thinking like, yeah, we can do it by tomorrow and we will do it by tomorrow. But if it's a refinance, I have a little bit of buffer because there's no actual, like, you're not buying a property. So I don't have to worry about a breach of contract. Well, it turns out it was an actual purchase and it was closing the very next day. So we closed it within 24 hours, and there was no, like, we pulled the tax certificate. We did the building searches. It was a duplex, so we had to make sure that it was a legal duplex. We still checked the title. Now, we were able to do it in 24 hours because things for that file aligned. Like, for example, when we did the title search, there were no major issues that needed to be resolved. And most times there aren't, but sometimes there are. So we can do it as fast as we need to. But there's also a number of factors that they're endless, right? Like, so for example, that property was in Windsor. Windsor allows you to pull a tax certificate online. So I can pull it at any time. If it's midnight on a Saturday, I can pull it. If it's in Kingsville or Essex, for example, you can't necessarily pull a tax certificate. Now, we have title insurance, so that can cover that, so you don't necessarily need that. But if it's, for example, a property located near the water, then the Conservation Authority might apply. So you might not be able to do it within 24 hours unless the risk would be that the that you don't know whether there's any outstanding IRCA permits. So we can close it as fast as we need to, but there are some things that are beyond our control. Like, for example, if I do a search and there's an outstanding solar, like there's a solar panel lease on the property that I didn't know about, well, now we got to coordinate with that company. It might take a day or two. But generally, like a quick close for us would be like 2 to 3 days. We can, it just depends on the property, if it's a purchase, if it's a refinance. But if we have to do it, like when I got that purchase agreement, I knew that if I don't get this done, this guy's going to be breaching an agreement, and it's far more serious than just not like, oh yeah, you're going to have to wait because I don't have time. So yeah, we're able to do it if we have to.
Yeah, 2 to 3 days I think is kind of incredible, if you can do it, right?
It's like, it's the same thing. Like, it depends if the clients are how invested the clients are in getting the work done. Because sometimes I have clients that, I can't give you my ID. I don't have time. I'm busy. Like, I've had clients that have asked me to do stuff super quick, and then okay, we have everything ready. We're ready to sign, and they're not available for a signing meeting. And it's like, well, how do you want me to do it? You got to sign now. Because we sign online, we'll actually do like after hours and weekends appointments if we have to. Like, we'll accommodate those, but yeah, it depends on how cooperative everyone is. Like, sometimes we'll ask for the home insurance, and like, for example, if they work with an insurance agent, then it's easier for us to get that because we can just contact the agent ourselves. If they work with if their policies with like Bel Air Direct or TD Insurance, we're actually not allowed to just contact TD and say, hey, change the mortgage lender name from RBC to CIBC. So we'll have to have the client call. That can slow us down because the client's like, I don't want to call. So it's as fast as everybody allows us to do it. It's the same thing. Like, if we can't get the mortgage instructions, we'll hound the lender, but sometimes it's just totally beyond our control. Like, if the lender is just, I'm not going to get them to you, then it is what it is. But we do everything that we can I hate not closing deals. I do everything I can to make sure that they close.
No, that makes sense, and that's huge, a big commitment. Jordan, do you have any specific things that you can think about for legal that have come up for you? I guess recently, being a realtor. I have something where I can go, but I just want to.
I was talking on a specific property. They had trouble getting title insurance. I don't even know if they could get title insurance, but they still closed it. I don't know exactly how it works, but as a lawyer, you're getting the title insurance.
We order it. Yep, we order it. So how it works is when we get a file, if it's a refi. Okay, so title insurance has 2 policies. It's not mandatory, but in a sense, one of the policies is mandatory. So there's an owner policy, which covers anything that would have been uncovered by a survey, and it has some other coverages. That's not mandatory when you buy, but there's a lender policy as well. And so if you're doing a refinance or a purchase, the lender's mortgage instructions, I've never seen one that doesn't say this, says that you have to buy title insurance. So the lawyer buys it on behalf of the lender. Then the client has the choice of whether they want the homeowner policy or not. The homeowner policy, I mean, if you're buying a house for $500,000, it might be a couple $100. And if you move in and you find out that there's any issues, because surveys cost thousands of dollars and take many weeks, it just makes sense to buy it. So we tell clients, because we have to tell them, that it's not mandatory, but then it's also, I've only had a handful of clients that have said, I don't want to pay for it. The owner policy lasts the entire time you live there, and the lender policy lasts the entire time that that loan is outstanding.
So what are you actually buying?
Yeah,
So
what is the owner's policy? What does that cover?
So it covers a lot of things. So if there's there's some major things that people would want to know about. So for example, in an area where there's new builds, people will think, well, I have a new build, I don't necessarily need it. But I've heard stories where you have a property that was built, the property next door is vacant, it's just bare land at this point. The property that was built, they install a swimming pool. And now that they've installed a swimming pool, it's now encroaching on that other person's land because they've built it past the property line. Well, the other owners, like the owners for the bare land, they may already own the land. So now they're building a house, and now they're going to go put up a fence, and they go, oh, wait, like this pool is on our land. Well, what do you do with that? Like, the pool is already built. You can't just move the pool. So in that case, the title insurance company actually dealt with all of the legal disputes, so all of the costs associated with the lawyers going back and forth. They also deal with, okay, can we move this? If it's a fence issue or a boundary issue, like let's say it's a shed, maybe we can tear it down and have it moved over somewhere else. So they'll cover the cost of that. In that case, you might just have the side with the pool buy out a portion, however
Right.
much over the boundaries it is of that land. So title insurance covers all of that. So you basically just say, wow, I have an issue, and you give it to the title insurer, and they'll let you know if it's covered or not. It also covers some other things that are not as major, but like for example, if there's unpaid taxes, that can form a lien on the property. And so if you're a buyer and the seller has unpaid taxes, you can then just go to the title insurer and say there's unpaid taxes, and they'll pay you, they'll reimburse you for it. For us, we do the tax certificate search anyways, even though it's covered by the title insurer, only because the cost of a tax certificate is like $75, and if I've seen some pretty hefty unpaid tax bills, like 5, 6, even 10 grand. So it's a lot more. There's a more peace of mind just knowing, okay, I've spent $75 on a tax certificate, and then the client knows if there's
Right.
any issues and we can deal with it. Because even though it's like, hey, the title insurer is going to cover the $6,500, they're still usually ticked off. So, but title
It's good
insurance.
to protect yourself. You really never know, what's happening on the background or with that previous owner.
Yeah, so the lawyer is the one that orders it and facilitates the obtaining the title insurance, and so issues that you might run into with title insurance is that if there's, for example, let's say you're buying and the seller has a similar name, like if my name's Christian Alexander Janice, if there's an Alexander Janice, not even no middle name, or Alexander Robert Janice, and that person has like unpaid child support, then that will flag as like, hey, we have a similar name and they owe $10,000 to somebody, and there's a judgment against that person. So when you're going to order the title insurance, you have to disclose that. So we'll have to deal with it and say, okay, it's Christian Alexander, it's not Alexander Robert. So we're going to have an affidavit signed to confirm that they're not the same person. So there's sometimes you run into issues that you have to coordinate with the title insurer, because they'll put exceptions like, oh, we're not going to cover this, or we need to make sure that this is above board.
Okay.
So we deal with all of that. Why a property wouldn't be insurable? There would probably be like some fraud indicators.
Some fraud.
Fraud indicators. So like that seems to be a popular thing now with people listing properties that they don't actually own, or mortgage fraud. It's more popular than you think, more so in the GTA, but like other things that might make a property uninsurable is if there's issues on title that need to be rectified and haven't been rectified. So
Yeah, I think it was a past zoning of a specific property, and then the current listing didn't match that zoning or how the previous owner bought it. So I think there was issues there, not being able to. Things didn't line up, right?
in most cases, what they'll do though, if there's issues like that, is they'll find a way to put an exception in there. So like I've seen issues where, there's a right of way that's actually registered on the property. So that could result in title issues in the future, because somebody could claim that they have a benefit to the land, or that they can use the right of way. So the title insurer will add an exception saying, we're insuring over all title issues except anything related to this right of way. So, and that's what we deal with. So if there's any issues like that, the lawyer will coordinate with the title insurer and make sure that's dealt with. But I think the big thing that I see with realtors, that there needs to be better synergy between those two parties, because as the realtor, you're meeting with these clients and you have this standard ORIA form that you sign with them. But when you get into the schedules, there's a whole bunch of clauses that get added that can cause confusion that I don't necessarily know that everybody fully understands, and that would benefit from having legal input. The issue is that the lawyers are never available. And I know that oftentimes you're meeting with clients after hours because work schedules and whatnot. Yeah. So I definitely think that we try to make ourselves available, and I think that that's beneficial for the realtors, but also beneficial for the clients to make sure that they are well informed of any potential issues. I think that's a big thing for lawyers right now.
If I'm buying, because I'm interested in that statement just for myself. So if I'm buying a property, Jordan's my agent, and we're writing an offer, and it has maybe something outside of the standard conditions, is that somewhere where like I'm sending you an email, or am I calling you, or is if he's working, like how is it? How do you think that is the best way to happen?
Yeah, so our work phone is available on our cell phone. So we have two separate, like obviously it's separate from my work. My personal line is separate from my work line, but it's also an app on my phone. So you can still call me and it will go right to my phone, or you can text me and it will go right to my phone. So if it's an urgent matter, I make myself available because I understand that the agents are meeting with clients after hours. So it's hard to say, hey agents, you can only call me if you need something during the day, because they're going to say, well, our clients are working during the day and want to meet with us at night to make offers. So you can call, text, or email. They all go to my phone. And what we do is, it depends on the nature of the question. Like a lot of them, we can answer very quickly. So yes, I make myself available, and people are like, well, you can't be too available. But at the same time, if it's a 2-second question, then it's not a big deal for me.
Could you see the value in that? I don't know.
Big time.
I'm trying to think of real examples that we've went through.
I have one.
Yeah, like intricate or yeah, there's some clauses, some of those standard or RIA clauses get very wordy and legal jargon. And I think if we sort of push past this sort of seller's market, go back to sort of a buyer's market and add more clauses and conditions on things, it could be huge.
I've had a couple. Like, for example, there was a listing recently where the listing said that the buyer can assume the existing mortgage of the seller's existing mortgage. That's pretty unique in and of itself. My main concern was that if they're assuming the mortgage, you have to protect that. Like the conditions have got to be different, because let's say you just do a standard financing condition. It's not going to work, because I highly doubt that the lender is going to get back to you within 3 days. It's not a standard, hey, am I getting approved? You actually have to get not just approved for the loan, but also approved for whether that mortgage can be assumed. So if you only put in there, hey, I only have 3 days or 5 days to get this, to waive this condition or fulfill it, that's probably not going to happen, because I don't think the bank would get back to you in time. So that's a pretty simple answer though, right? Like it doesn't take me a lot of time to help out and say, these are the things that you need to be wary of.
So would you be saying being wary, and this is the timeline, like don't commit to a timeline, or like, cause like I am actually interested in what you're saying. If I'm buying a property right now, I am trying to assume somebody's mortgage because I know they have 2% if they've done it, a few years ago, or say a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a real live example that I'm interested in how does that work. But so the main thing you're kind of flagging there is it's not going to be a 3-day condition removal. We're going to have to write that condition differently. So for Jordan,
I think it's a value add. Like when I go to present an offer on behalf of a buyer to that seller and say, hey, listen, this is what I just found out. We've been in contact with the mortgage rep or the lawyer, and this is what we need, and this is why we need it. And we're in direct communication with those others to make it happen, right? So everyone's on the same page, and it gives a good feeling for buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I think it's value add because everybody's informed, both the buyer side and the seller side. And then the other thing is that if a mistake is made, like let's say you have 3 to 5 days, the buyer's basically going to have to decide whether they want to waive the condition or back out. And then at that point, they might be frustrated because they had every intention. But if the seller wants to be difficult or finds another way, like let's say somebody comes in with a higher offer and they're like, oh, now I can use this to take advantage of this situation. Whereas it's a very simple, like, okay, from our side, I know from dealing with whether the mortgages can be assumed that it's not a 3-day process. So it's very simple, easy communication. Other examples involve assuming tenancies. So, sometimes you just take the standard ORIA clause and it will say tenants are going to move out. But if they don't move out, then the buyer is going to assume the tenancy. That can be a big issue because if the buyer doesn't fully understand that, and if the realtor doesn't fully understand the clause, because they're just taking, because ORIA,
that's a standard clause, right?
Yeah, it's in the ORIA. Like they have a bank of clauses that they can pull from, and as they say, lawyers, like, don't you use templates? Yeah, we use templates, but the problem is that the templates are just so that we're not typing everything word for word. Like we don't need to type everything from scratch. But we know how to modify the template to say, like, okay, this is a good starting point, but this isn't what you actually need in this situation. So I do think that it's helpful to to have the lawyer and the realtor communicate if there's something unique about a property.
Before we go on to, I guess, that next example you brought up, I'm still back on this because I want to use this for myself. I'm being a little greedy here, but like, if I'm writing an offer with Jordan and I want to assume the mortgage, at that point we're like, how would you deal with that regardless? If you didn't have the access to a lawyer, you didn't even think that, like, how would you word that? Would you use one of those standard clauses?
I would put a financing condition for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks to figure it out.
And I would be calling the potential mortgage rep, and I would give ourselves a buffer of time, and just go about that way. But like I said, like if you're calling a lawyer or in direct communication with a lender before offering or during offering, and it goes a long way, right? It's
No, so from a real estate investor standpoint, I'm saying, okay, you can do that, but one, I want to talk to the lawyer to see how do we word this to make sure it's worded right. Two, I want to make sure that what you just said, like, I don't want the seller to get an advantage on me. I want them the advantage to be on me, the buyer. I'm giving them the offer, meaning like, if I only put 5 days, or if I can't figure this out in 5 days, I don't want them to be able to get a higher offer and be able to take that offer. So I want to figure out how can I write this condition that, it's fair, but I'm not like, I'm not going to price myself out of the deal, or I'm not going to get like the short end of the stick.
Yeah, no, and as the lawyer, we can only say, hey, look, these are some of the issues that we would see with that. We understand that because, for example, during COVID, when the market was booming, I would never recommend that somebody buy a house without a home inspection. It's crazy. I also understand that as a buyer in that market, one, you can't buy a home inspection on every property when you're putting in offers on 20 properties. So they just need to understand the risk of that, because a lot of times we see people buy houses and then there's an issue after the fact and they're like, oh, I didn't know about this. The seller didn't disclose this. And it's like, you don't have to follow our advice. I understand, because there's like business terms, right? The business terms would be, is this a risk that you're willing to take? If you know that whether the mortgage could be assumed might take 2 weeks and you might lose this offer, obviously you can't follow the advice of saying, hey, take this into consideration that you're going to need more than 3 days. You might say, I only have 3 days, and if it doesn't work, that's a risk I'll have to take. So we try to just advise people what we see on our side, so that they can make informed decision. Because I understand, like, there are a lot of risks and you can't always be as cautious as a lawyer might want you to be, because it's just you're not going to win the deal.
I think Jordan's learned with me is I want as much information from the lawyer, from the real estate agent, from everybody involved, from the town, from the different departments, drainage, like, regardless, I want to talk to everybody. Like when I was going for Texas, like, I talked to everybody within 3 hours of, the planning department, the drainage department. I had you doing searches around like different properties that have moved on that street, neighbors, just weird people might not. But the reason I'm saying this is, like, I do this for strategy. I want to know as much as I possibly can, and then at least I can make decisions like, it's worth taking that risk. Like, what's the worst case there, or what is likely the worst case, or what is the likely income, what is the likely outcome, and what is the worst case outcome. And then if I'm okay with the worst case, I'm going to proceed, because depending if the investment is actually worth it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the assuming the mortgage, the risk is that you can't assume the mortgage. So if you're like, hey, this property's good, it's even better with a 2% mortgage, but it's still good even if I don't have a 2%, and I know that I'm qualified for like an adequate amount at 5%, then that's probably a risk you might be willing to take, right? Because you can say, I can waive this condition. I know I'm still going to be able to complete the transaction, and because the seller might say, I'm not going to give you 2 weeks. But that's where the realtor's involved, right? They're the ones negotiating the terms. So, yeah. And they have a better understanding. Like, as the lawyer, we're not directly involved, so we don't know what their feelings are on the other side. We don't know how many, is this a hot property? We just know, hey, this is what I would take into consideration.
Yeah, no, I think I would rely a lot on you, Jordan, to get that. I call it the temperature check. Yeah. You're the one talking to them. You're getting the temperature checked. Can we get 7 days? Can we get 10? You're throwing those floaters out there. You kind of know how they're going to react. Sure, I might even say take 5, and then like maybe I lose a deal, but at least I know that. at least I can kind of make my strategy around that. And I think for me, that's really important because, like, I don't know. I like I want to have the big end of the stick always. You know that. I don't like the short. And so yeah, that's a cool topic. I really got to do some thinking on because I'm interested in purchasing property. I made that more property this year, and I definitely am thinking about can I get some assumable mortgages because of those. I know there's 2% rates floating around. I sure wish I went 10 years on some of my when they had that 2% rate out there. But yeah, that's really important, and I think it should be involved in your strategy.
And I think the realtors and even the mortgage agents get frustrated because not just with helping out, but oftentimes if there is an issue with the file, they can't get a hold of the lawyer. Like they're trying to call, they can't get a hold of anybody, and they're like, "What is going on with the deal?" So, kind of to bring it full circle and go back to our process is when we are on the day of closing, when the deal is done. So if it's a refinance, when the mortgage is actually registered, or if it's a purchase, when the deed and the mortgage is registered, if there's a mortgage, we send out automated notifications to the clients, the mortgage agent, and the realtors saying, "Hey, just so you know, the deal is done." That way, you're not sitting there on a Friday closing day going, "Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Is it done? Do I call?" I'm scared to call and find out what's happened. Like, did any issues come up?
Nice. That's a good service.
I found a lot of realtors like that, and a lot of mortgage agents like it as well, because then you can not only, it's a value add for you, but it's also a peace of mind because okay, the deal is done, so that's good. But then you can also follow up with the client and say, "Hey, I got a notification, it's good." If we run into issues, we will call you as well, just to let you know, "Hey, this is what's happening," just so you don't call the client and say, "Hey, hope you moved in," and then they're like, "Oh no, there was actually an issue. It got extended by 2 days," and they're like, "What? You're not paying attention," So we try to help out in that way and keep everybody informed because oftentimes it's good to have, if we're having an issue with the lender, we'll try to deal with it ourselves. But sometimes the mortgage agents will have a better connection to the lender and have more pull because they'll deal with the lender and they can negotiate more. So if the lender's being stubborn on a condition and I'm like, "Hey, this, like, we need help," we'll contact you and say, like, we don't want to blindside you the day of and say, "Oh, there was a sticky condition we couldn't deal with." Like, we'll say, "Hey, look, we've been trying to deal with this and we're having trouble. Like, can you reach out?" Or if we're dealing with another agent, we can go between the lawyers, but sometimes I know, like, okay, this doesn't necessarily have to go through the lawyer, and trying to wait for that lawyer to respond to me, I can tell the agent, like, for example, if there's a dishwasher that's broken, the lawyers can go back and forth over whether money should be involved, but the agents are just way more, like, they're way faster at communicating with one another. So they can often get it resolved without having to have the lawyers involved if it's a minor issue or something that can be resolved, because the lawyers are, like, you send out a message to the lawyer, you might not get a response for 24 hours and tomorrow's the closing day.
Right.
No, for sure. No, it makes total sense. I think, Jordan, like, we have this example where we go through where, like, I was trying to get conditions for my side of things, the mortgage side. They had 13 conditions, and some of those conditions, like, one of them was the employer wouldn't give a job letter. Like, they didn't get back to us. They tried to come, it was 2 months and they never got back to them. So I got involved. And we're sending emails everywhere. And then finally, I think you had the idea. Let's just get the lawyer to send the company an email.
Yeah, more professional, sort of official from the lawyers type thing.
Same day. Within the same day, they responded and said, "We'll have this to you by the end of the day." And that they were trying for 2 months trying to get this.
I know it sucks.
And so it comes from a lawyer.
Sometimes when the lawyer steps in, people start moving. I don't know why. It's just that letterhead all of a sudden can't get a hold, because I have it even with the assistants. They're like, "I've been trying to call the building department for weeks," and then it's like, okay, so I'll call and leave a message, and all of a sudden I get it right away. And I don't know what it is. Like, I'm no different than them, but all of a sudden people start moving as soon as I think they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. But the reality is oftentimes we don't really have any say over what they do. But yeah, like, we try to deal with the conditions. The other thing for us, like, the value add is it's not even really a value add. It's more of a care thing. Is like, I've had refinances where, somebody who's refinancing, they have a first time home buyer incentive that's secured as a second mortgage on the property. It's an interest free loan, but you have to live there for 20 years in the city of Windsor. I believe it's 20 years. And I told the client, like, the lender is requiring that you pay this out. It doesn't make any sense. You have like 4 years left. And if you pay it out, you actually have to pay out the difference between what the value of the property was when you bought it and what it was now. So in that case, I told the mortgage agent, like, hey, I know you want this closed quickly, but it's going to cost the client $15,000 extra dollars. So I told the client, like, hey, this is what it's going to cost you this much extra. Like, I think you should consider moving the day if you can hold off on the money. And in that situation, the mortgage agent and I worked together to have that condition waived, that be paid out, so that we were able to just get it postponed, so that the new mortgage lender would still be first priority, and then that city of Windsor would go below.
Nice. No,
Delayed the closing day, but at the same time also saved the client 15 grand.
yeah, and if the seller was willing to move, then it's fine, right? Like, I think that's the important part there. Some sellers might say, no, I don't want to move. Then what do? You're going to pay the 15?
Well, in this case, it was
Oh,
a
was it a
refinance.
refi?
It was a refinance.
Okay, it
So
was
he owned the
refi.
house, so he didn't really need the money. And I mean, he did have plans for it, but it was for renovations.
So I know we're getting close to time here. So I guess I want to give you both the opportunity to just close. Like, again, I love closing. I always say, like, why choose Paul McAllister? Why choose LendCity? Why choose Simply Close? And then I'm going to ask you next, why choose Jordan Lusu? We can close with that.
I think you choose Simply Close because we provide a better service. Hands down, I stand by that. Our prices are very fair for the service that we provide. We're very competitive with the market, and we go above and beyond every single time. We have a simplified process. We use technology to our advantage, which makes it very simple for clients to move throughout the closing process without having to deal with all the friction that would come from a traditional or a more old school law office.
Why choose Jordan Lusu?
Why I choose Jordan Lusu is going to be the level of service that you get from a realtor. Nothing but professionalism and respect for everybody, right? It doesn't matter if you're looking at a lease or $1 million property. I always promise to treat my customers and clients with respect and professionalism, and always deliver on the highest level of service as possible.
And I'm going to close because I put them on the spot. I'm going to put myself on the spot. Why choose Paul McAllister? Why choose LendCity? If you're an investor, for sure, we specialize in investments. I'm an investor myself for the past 10 years. I am, yeah, and I've joined LendCity because of the investment side. But if you're a first-time home buyer, whatever you are, we have systems, processes that try to make it easy on you. We try to not just get you the money or get you the mortgage, get you the rates. We try to educate you along the way, and we try to keep you involved with all professionals along the way as well. We work with top-notch professionals. We pride ourselves in our communication, and we pride ourselves on who we work with. And we want to keep everybody in the loop. And it's not just that we're trying to get you in your home or get you to refinance or helping you achieve those goals. We're trying to make it an experience that you're going to remember. That's how we want to be. We want to be remembered as that person or that company that went above and beyond outside the lines to make that deal easier for you. So with that said,
Don't close it yet. Don't close it yet. I actually have one more thing for the mortgage agents for your sell side, or the value add that you bring. I do think it's important for mortgage agents to educate clients about what we often deal with is that if there's ever a mistake on our end, the only one that they'll ever point out is, oh, my date of birth is wrong. If like the month and the day get mixed up. For a mortgage agent, the only thing people are focused on is the rate, because that's really the only part that they understand, because they don't deal with mortgages every day. I think it's important that clients get educated on, hey, for example, if you get this mortgage, there's no line of credit built into it, or there's no opportunity, like there's no flexibility in the future. So while you think you're saving, 0.2%, if in 2 years from now you want to pull out the equity of this, you're going to pay a penalty and things like that. Like, the rate is not the only thing that matters. And I think it's important that it seems like that's what you guys do is take people through, like, hey, let's make sure you're the right product for what you're trying to accomplish. If somebody wants to buy a house, renovate it, and then refinance it to buy another one, that's a completely different product than a first-time home buyer who's on a fixed income and is probably going to sit in there for 5 years.
no, for sure. I think people can make some really big bad choices, meaning if you're going to go fix and you're going to renovate it and you're going to refinance it, that could cost you 10, 15 grand. And it could have been $1,500. So those are things that we definitely pride ourselves on that aspect of it. And it's just not about the rate. Sure, if you want the best rate, we can tell you the rate, but we can also tell you those terms and kind of there's always a reason the rate is there, right?
The exit strategy.
Yeah, and I always say, like, you need to be thinking A, B, C, D. I want to know what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve in the next 5 years, because it helps to strategize. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and I think it is important for people to kind of strategize. I always talk about it with Jordan. I'm thinking, 5 moves ahead, and I'm always going to be flexible, but like that would be the great advice, and I appreciate you bringing that up.